This is episode 341 of Jumblethink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Jumblethink, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers all about their journey of turning their dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Larry Forletta. More about Larry in a moment. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you've never subscribed to Jumblethink, head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts, search for Jumblethink, and click subscribe. To make it even easier, if you head on over to jumblethink.com, you'll find links to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Pandora, and more. Now let's join today's conversation with our guest, Larry Forletta. Hey there, friends. Welcome to Jumblethink. My name's Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a really interesting and quite cool conversation lined up for you in a moment. Today's conversation was recorded live at PodMax Global. Typically, PodMax is this really cool event in Trenton, New Jersey, where entrepreneurs, business leaders, interesting people get to share their story with podcasters like me. Now, because of COVID, they've taken it global and taken it virtual. This was recorded at the first PodMax Global event. There's another one coming up, so if you're an entrepreneur or you just have a really cool story that you want to get out there, go check them out, podmax.co. Once again, thanks to PodMax for hosting our conversation with today's guest, Larry Forletta. Now, Larry is the guy behind Forletta Investigative Security Consulting. He's a PI. He investigates really interesting cases. Before he got into that, though, he spent 30 years in law enforcement. He started out his career at the Maryland State Police, moved in to the DEA as a DEA agent. He's worked on cases like the Dakota James case, which was turned into a docu-series on Oxygen. Today's conversation is a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and join the conversation we had with today's guest, Larry Forletta. Our guest today is Larry Forletta. Larry, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for having me today.
Excited to meet you. Excited to have you on the show. I've had former FBI agents on the show. I've had former professionals in various law enforcement, but I've never had someone that does what you do. So I'm excited to talk about that. To kick this off, I want you to share a little bit about what Forletta Investigative Security Consulting is and what you do.
Well, thank you. And Forletta Consulting is a private investigation business.
Yeah.
We started this some 13 years ago. Mm-hmm. And as a result of my law enforcement background career as a DEA agent, I decided to go on my own and try to see how this business would work. And so far, so good. And, I don't know how much longer I'll continue, but it's been another challenge in my career, in my life, as opposed to working for the government and going on and doing your own thing, so to speak.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your career in law enforcement. I think a lot of people think investigations, maybe the Pinkertons, they've seen the show about them. They've seen maybe Magnum PI, and they think, oh, the person's just kind of out doing things. They're kind of spying on the person for somebody else. And we're going to talk about what you specifically do, but you root what you do based on experience. You were a part of the Maryland State Police. You were a DEA agent. So talk to us a little bit about your career and what led you to where you are today.
Well, thanks. Well, I started my career. I went to college.
Yeah.
I got my bachelor's degree in law enforcement. So I knew that my career was going to head in that direction.
Was that something that you always wanted to do? How did you get there? Did you always want to be a police officer? Did you always think like, oh, this is my career since a child? How did that evolve?
Yeah, long ago, actually, as a child, that was something that I thought that was something I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Is to go into law enforcement and see how it worked out. And it worked out great for me.
Yeah.
Law enforcement, just like anything else, is not for everybody.
Right.
And the more specified you get in law enforcement, like working undercover.
Yeah.
And doing a lot of different dangerous things, even that separates us from somebody that works, let's say, uniform and patrol, because you are literally working with a criminal element side by side,
right?
Including, informants who are part of that criminal element.
Yeah.
So the peak of the danger continues. And I don't want to diminish anybody that works in uniform because it's a very dangerous position to be in, especially nowadays. But and it's even more publicized about the killings and shootings of law enforcement than it was back when I started my career. But it did exist back then because I've had friends that have been killed in the line of duty.
I grew up, my dad was a fire chief and grew up around emergency services. And there's a lot of pride that goes into that job of being in emergency services. There's a lot of pride, I know, in the world of policing, whether that's a uniformed officer, a detective, or something more in the federal branch with the DEA or FBI. There's a lot of pride and really honor that goes along with that. And I think that we've lost an understanding of that a little bit in our society. We've villainized, there are bad police officers, there are bad FBI agents, there are bad actors there. But I want to thank you for your service and time there, because growing up with an emergency services parent that's been there, done that, one of the things that I realized is that there's a lot of unspoken truths about it that people just don't realize. The amount of mental, emotional, physical stress that goes into that career. So thank you for your service.
Well, thank you. One of the things a lot of people don't realize is that law enforcement has one of the highest suicide rates in just about any profession.
Yeah.
So it is a very stressful and demanding career and job.
Yeah.
And I think in today's standards, I think we've lost one word, and that's called respect.
Yeah.
And yes, there are bad actors. I've met some of them, and I put some of them in federal prison.
Yeah.
From law enforcement.
Yeah.
So you punish the bad actors, but you don't paint everybody with the same brush.
Yes, there is a lot of people have been villainized in this space that are true heroes, putting their lives on the line for others and sacrificing for all of our good. And I wish that story was told more.
I wish it was too. I think there's a disservice right now to the people that risk their lives every day in this country.
Yeah.
And I would hope that more of this becomes more public knowledge. Are you able to see on the news media are the bad things that law enforcement do instead of a lot of the good things that they do? Yeah,
absolutely. So at some point, though, you put in several years, you end up being at the DEA. You work in 3 offices, DC, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. I'm a PA boy, so I get that region. I grew up in the Harrisburg region. It's a great place to live, but I'm sure that there's a lot of complexity in what you did as a DEA agent. So talk to us a little bit about your role there.
Well, I started with DEA around 1985. And that was the beginning, or just prior to that, the beginning of the drug war. So
yes. Yeah.
Just 2 years before I became an agent, there was a nationally and internationally known incident involving Enrique Kiki Camarena. He was a DEA agent who was kidnapped, tortured, and killed in Mexico.
Wow.
And so that really put DEA on the national spotlight. I'd say prior to that, it wasn't a well-known agency, sort of like the FBI,
right?
Because I think DEA took a different approach, more in the shadows as opposed to being in the forefront.
Yeah.
And after that particular incident took place, DEA became very well-known amongst the general public.
Right. We hear about the Mexican cartels back then, the Colombian cocaine rings, and all of that. And, that was what, Reagan that really brought that to the forefront?
Yeah, it was President Reagan that really pushed for exposing all these cartels. But we can even go back to Richard Nixon.
Oh, wow.
Because Richard Nixon helped create DEA.
Okay.
So there was, back in those days, there were quite a few different government agencies doing drug work.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So what happened was they decided to consolidate all these agencies just like now what they did today with Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Where you had, Customs Border Patrol, Secret Service, a whole different agencies, and they made them under one. So that's basically what they did with DEA.
Wow.
Because DEA was a revenue agency at one time under the IRS and then under Department of Treasury. And it eventually went to the Bureau of Dangerous Narcotics and Drugs, BNDD, and then so on. And it, it's spun off from there.
As we mentioned before, the world of law enforcement it's a hard place to work. You decide that you want to leave before you see what some of your colleagues have gone through, and where they've either physically or mentally or emotionally weren't able to sustain. Talk to us a little bit about that process. I know that you're proud of the career that you built and had. It must have been a hard decision to step away from that.
It's a very hard decision to step away from that because, as a young man, I started out at age 22 and I left at 52.
Wow.
So for the most of my adult life, that's the only thing that I really knew.
But longer than a military career. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of military career people, they age out way before that even.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Some of the military guys, though, they do a great job for our country. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, when you look at our industry, you have to make a decision when it's time to go. Unfortunately, some people that I worked with, they went out with their nails across the woodwork, not to leave.
Yeah.
But I began to realize that I was at the right age at the right time, and it was time to leave.
Yeah.
Because, law enforcement is generally for young men and women. And it's not, for once you hit that certain age, everything changes about your reaction time, your ability to think maybe quicker on your feet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of desire behind it. And then the stress that goes with it.
Yeah.
And you have to decide, hey, look, I've had enough. And that's where I was. I'd had enough.
And that's been one of the interesting conversations of late, is the mental health aspect of these kind of careers, high intensity. And I think a lot of us, we heard about, shell shocked in the military. We heard about different places where people were emotionally or physically hurt in the military, but we didn't apply it outside of that. And the law enforcement space, I think, is one of those spaces that there's a lot more emotional. You get to see, and I say that in a way that it sounds more positive. It's not, but you are required to see some of the most devastating things that a person could see in our culture. You're solving those crimes, you're solving those problems. And I don't think that most of us realize the emotional, physical strain that actually takes on us.
Well, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, you see some of the most unruly people in your life, some of the worst of mankind. That's what you look at every day in a lot of cases. Law enforcement, again, there's many issues, including PTSD.
Yep.
I know we heard a lot about that being in the military, but I can tell you it probably has existed for a long time in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so you have to begin to look at other organizations and what they go through.
Yeah.
And of course, like I said, the military does a tremendous job for our country, and so does law enforcement. Because without law enforcement, there's no rule of law. Without rule of law, you have chaos.
Yeah.
And then the issues really begin to multiply.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to pivot towards the end of the segment. In our second segment, we're going to talk a lot more about what you're doing in the investigative security space. As we wrap up this first segment, we always ask 3 questions. The first one being, how do you find purpose in what you do?
Wow, that's a tough question. The purpose in what I have done was to help people who had these issues.
Yeah.
Try to create a better environment maybe for some people.
Yeah.
Because, as a role, and when you're on the law enforcement side and you work the streets, you're also a counselor.
Yeah.
A psychologist.
Yeah.
A social worker.
Yeah.
I mean, all the above. And, law enforcement is a very discretionary job.
Yeah.
Because, there's sometimes that discretion is a better part of valor.
Yeah.
And you just can't go around arresting everybody.
Right.
That's just not the way to do it.
Right.
And so you have to handle each situation unique. I've had kids, juveniles, okay, and not arresting them, but taking them home to their parents and explaining to them what just happened and what could have happened.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And that's really part of the job, is really not to always incarcerate people. I mean, you have to go after the most violent criminal element.
Right.
But when you even look at today as what's going on in our country, I think the police officers are put in some very bad situations because they don't want to arrest nice people, good, hardworking people.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's not their job.
Right.
And I think under the current climate with these executive orders, have put law enforcement right back in the middle of politics.
Yeah.
Which there's no room. There's no place for politics in law enforcement.
Right.
I'm dead set against it from day one.
Yeah.
And I still speak out about it today.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting things is that I don't know if, some of the people at the highest levels that are in these controversies are guilty or not. But the fact that we're talking about it means that there's something questionable going on. Coming back to that idea of heroes, we need to be able to look up at these people, whether it's a James Comey or someone like that, and look at it and go, there's no question about their integrity. And I hate that he may be the best person ever. I don't know. I don't know him, but the fact that it's been so politicized, no one's going to come out clean on that. It just dirties the job.
Well, it's the individuals that dirty the job.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And it's their behavior that dirties the job.
Yeah.
Okay. So whether you've got corrupt FBI agents or corrupt DEA agents or corrupt law enforcement, those are the small percentages of the hardworking, dedicated professionals.
Yeah.
So Jim Comey and people like Jim Comey, there's only one place for them, and it's called prison.
Wow.
There's no room for them.
Yeah.
And there's no room for anybody in law enforcement that uses that authority and abuses that authority.
Absolutely. When you get into questioned ethics and integrity and you politicize it just like you're talking about, there's no room for that. It's just got to be stopped.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah. For you, you've been through many situations that are unique situations. What is one challenge you're currently working to overcome?
I've got so many different cases that I deal with. And one of them is, working with law enforcement on some investigations and with different clients. And I can't get into specifics.
Right.
But they're very challenging cases.
Yeah. And
sometimes you look at law enforcement, did they do a proper job or not a proper job?
Yeah.
That's always a tightrope. And those are the kind of things that goes on.
Yeah.
So I always try to be fair and open-minded.
Yeah.
Try to work with the law enforcement agencies in a particular case where, maybe a family member has a disagreement or don't agree with the outcome and so on.
Yeah.
So those are very challenging cases because you're sort of in the middle. I have to look at, is it fair to families who lost maybe a loved one? They're a victim of a crime.
Yeah.
And nothing took place. And so that is a very challenging, and those type of cases, they take their toll on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's very challenging as it goes along.
Yeah. And finally, what's the next big dream, idea, or goal that you have or you're working on?
I think my big goal is to expand my business into the next level.
Yeah.
In the sense of creating a business company that is well known and well respected.
Yeah.
And to create an environment where people know when they call us that we have the integrity to help them, whatever their case is.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier, we work with a lot of lawyers and law firms, corporations, businesses, and, educational, military, government, etc., and private citizens. So we have a full gamut.
Yeah.
And so what I did with my business model was to really make us a one-stop shop.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break right here. When we come back, we're going to dive deeper into what Larry's building, what he's doing, and some really interesting things he's worked on since he's started his own consulting agency. We'll be right back. There is a lot going on here at Jumblethink, and we want to keep you up to date on upcoming episodes, idea camps, some other really cool things we're working on. So how do you stay in the loop? Head on over to jumblethink.com, where you can sign up for our email newsletter or find those magical links to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, where you can follow along with the journey and even join into the conversation so that we can chase those dreams and ideas together. So come on over and let's turn those dreams and ideas into reality. Now let's return to the conversation with Larry Forletta. We are back with Larry Forletta. All right, before we dive into the segment, we always want to know how people can find and connect with you. And especially with what you're doing, you're helping people, you're helping businesses, you're helping even governments. So talk to us a little bit about how people can find and connect with you.
Well, we have a website.
Okay.
It's www.fcisllc.com. We're under private investigators in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Google. And we have, various means through social media and et cetera.
We'll put all those links in the episode notes. So it's really easy. Wherever you're listening right now, the links are right down below where you're listening. Click on the link. It'll take you right there. Definitely check out what Larry's doing there. Now, before we were talking on the interview, you were sharing some of the things that you've worked on. We were talking about the Dakota James case. And you mentioned just a second ago that you're based out of Pittsburgh. So obviously Steelers fan.
100%.
Okay. I'm an Eagles fan, so I apologize for that. But
yeah, I know people sometimes in the middle of the state of Pennsylvania are confused.
Well, let's just put it this way. If it was like the Steelers against New England, I want to see New England eaten every day. So, or the Seahawks, or, the Cowboys. Well, the Eagles, I like the Eagles. So talk to us a little bit about, you do this investigative services. Talk to us about who you're servicing and what kind of services you're providing to them.
Well, we provide services to a lot of different groups.
Yeah.
I would say our primary clients are lawyers and law firms.
Okay.
We do about 90% business with those lawyers and law firms.
Yeah.
I developed a very good relationship, and I would say a very good reputation with a lot of the criminal defense community.
Yeah.
When I was in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And they knew that I had a job, and I knew that they had a job.
Yeah.
And they knew the type of investigations we did, which were thorough.
Yeah. But
they were honest.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of them actually reached out to me when I retired about doing some investigations for them. And so that's really how it started.
So when you say like they reached out, is like you weren't planning to do this when you retired, or this was kind of on the horizon, but it kind of opened up as people approached you?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I was going to do something else after I retired.
All right.
Then this light bulb hit me, and I decided no, I don't want to go to work for anybody else. I mean, I had opportunities once I retired to go to work for maybe some different companies and so on. In fact, I had some offers, and I decided, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else.
Yeah.
That I know that I'm the boss in this sense.
Yeah.
And that I have every opportunity because, I didn't want to limit myself to just doing certain things.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have done is I've gone out and I spoke to different groups.
Yeah. Whether
it's women's groups, a variety of, I do like what they call CLE classes for the legal community. And I do public speaking for local communities, chambers of commerce. I mean, just a host of things that I've done that actually helped me to expand and work through my business.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to look for limitations.
So you're not just doing investigations, you're also educating in this space too.
Yes.
Which
definitely.
is really important, because I think this space is, as an individual, it seems like it could be very confusing to try to navigate. And I can imagine with the complexities, whether it's a business case, whether it's government case, whether it's a personal case, even for the legal professional, their job is to show up in court and do their job. There's probably a lot of complexity that they don't even know how to face in trying to figure out what information is true, what's right, and how do we represent this.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why lawyers hire private investigators.
Yeah,
because they want to sort through some of the facts or non-existing facts and come up with the best solution for their client.
Yeah,
because you got to remember something: lawyers are mostly mitigation specialists.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So they try to look at in different type of cases, how do they mitigate the risk for their clients?
Yeah.
Meaning, are they looking at prison for 20 years? Could they be looking at prison for 5 years?
Wow.
Or do they think that they have a strong enough case where they will take and go to a jury trial?
Yeah.
So that's the decisions that lawyers have to make. And I can tell you, working on the criminal defense side is a lot more challenging in one sense when I was on the government side.
Yeah.
Because the government side, you have literally unlimited resources.
Wow.
On the private side, you don't have anywhere near the resources that the federal government has, for example, in cases.
Yeah.
So those are very challenging.
Yeah. When I hear personal investigations, when I hear the kind of work you're doing, what comes to mind are TV shows like Magnum PI and those kind of things. And I'm sure that there might be some kind of kernel of truth in there, but probably not a lot. So tell us what the real life of an investigator is like.
Well, Hollywood has done a lot to enhance maybe the private investigators, in their Ferraris and all these fancy cars that they drive.
You don't have a Ferrari or Maserati or?
No.
Oh,
okay. They make millions of dollars and they all have all these high value clients and so on and so on. But that's not really reality.
Yeah.
A lot of the investigators, they do a lot of different things, from like surveillances, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Some may work for insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
Some are, have their own businesses and they try to expand off of that. So we do, again, a variety of things. We do surveillances, obviously. Mm-hmm. If it's I'll give you an example, as a child custody case, or we'll do surveillances on, let's say, a local government official who may not be working the hours that they're claiming they're working, and they're cheating the system.
That never happens.
No.
Never.
And employees are cheating their employers. So there's a lot of that, that goes into this. And so we have resources that we use. So I just, on the way I look at things, I'll use other professionals to work with me on a case, as surveillance goes, for example. And there's a lot of different methods, techniques, and things like that. And we also, we do counter surveillances too. So there's a lot of different things that goes on there. For example, we do the technical security countermeasures, where I have my associates and we'll work together. For example, let's say a corporate client may think that somebody's listening to them, bugging their rooms. There's a lot of corporate espionage that goes on.
It's huge. We've had some guests on corporate espionage that have talked a little bit about that, but even working in the business space, as we've worked with Fortune 100 companies and some of the things that we've done in the web space, it's crazy the stories you hear about that corporate espionage stuff.
Well, that, and then you have, then you also have situations where some employee puts a camera in a woman's restroom.
Yeah.
And that is just devastating to that company.
Yep.
So we've taken on cases like that. And we've also taken on cases where the business thinks they're being spied on by maybe competitors or foreign entities. And we have done those. So, and again, there's a lot of different things that we do. Now, some private investigators and some companies say, well, we're experts in surveillance.
Yeah.
And, some people in the private investigation industry say, well, you should limit your expertise to one thing. I don't agree with that concept.
Right.
Because if you're somebody who has the particular training and education and so on that I do, I think we can just about handle any type of situation that comes in.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think, oh, we're just going to focus on this one thing, but you aren't doing every aspect of this. You might bring in an expert that works with you on a specific element of what you're doing too, right?
Yes, that's right. So we use, for example, if we're doing a case where we may need to identify somebody and tie them to something. So I have experts with DNA, a lab.
You've worked on some pretty crazy cases. You worked on the Dakota James case. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that turned into a docu-series for Oxygen and the smiley face killers and what that all looked like.
Well, I still think about that case by today, even though that happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's one of those cases that will live with you for as long as you're in existence.
Yeah.
Because nothing was really solved in that case.
Still isn't.
No, still has not been solved.
Wow.
So you can only imagine what the family had went through, especially when I first got involved in the case. And I worked with the family for about 40 days.
Wow.
So you begin to see all just the sorrow, the sadness, the stress, everything associated losing a child.
Yeah.
Which, that's the toughest thing in life, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, when you walk in those people's shoes, then you'll understand, but you don't until that, God forbid, that happens.
Right.
And so Dakota James became a real challenge because, we had a family that wasn't from Pittsburgh. It's kind of funny. They were from Maryland.
Yeah.
And I actually was actually introduced to them through a former Maryland State Trooper that I knew because I used to be a Maryland State Trooper.
Yeah.
And the family actually lived in an area called Frederick, Maryland.
Yeah, I know Frederick. Yeah.
I used to live in Frederick, Maryland.
Oh, okay.
So that's a small world.
Yes.
It's almost like, hey, did they put us together for a reason?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it worked out. I was, so what I basically did is I helped coordinate the search. I helped be the liaison with the law enforcement and the news media because it was a very publicized case.
Wow.
And so this was like probably one of my most challenging cases in the private sector.
Wow.
Because there's always that fine line. You're in the middle of trying to work with the clients and with law enforcement. I can tell you though that because of my background and some of the individuals I knew, we had a very good working relationship.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that worked. And it did.
Yeah.
Because gaining the cooperation of the authorities, some of them were even friends of mine.
Yeah.
So
they needed somebody that had the relationships to really be that liaison.
Yeah, it's nice when you can just pick up the phone and call somebody and then they know who it is and they trust you and you trust them.
Yeah.
That's what it all comes down to.
Yeah.
So with what we were able to do in that case, we worked with a variety of law enforcement agencies and some other private entities. We searched about 100 miles of water.
Wow.
And if you're familiar with Pittsburgh, Allegheny, Monongahela, the Ohio.
Yep.
And so the Ohio being the big river.
Yeah.
So we use drones, we use bloodhounds, we use search and rescue groups. There was, the family had used some search volunteers. I mean, Pittsburgh people are just fabulous.
Yeah.
They help volunteer the searches in the city. We had some search and rescue groups that I worked with that were, knew their stuff. And, I had to present it to the family and said, hey, these are people who are professionals. These are who we should be working with. Mm-hmm. Everything was volunteer work.
Wow.
So everybody pitched in. They volunteered their services.
Wow.
Including the drone company who I developed a very good relationship with. And they actually became involved in the Dakota James series because they helped film a lot of the bridges and the areas where when we began the search looking for Dakota. And so what happened was Dakota went missing in January. It was in the wintertime and it was extremely cold out. Mm-hmm. In 2018. Everything it's like a blur.
Yeah.
And in about March of that year, his body had surfaced in the Ohio. And we had put out rewards. We did a lot of news media information. Actually, the news media was very beneficial to us because they helped get the word out. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's a give and take. Mm-hmm. And I've had experience in my law enforcement career dealing with the news media.
Yeah.
And so again, it's a give and take, and it then becomes who do you trust?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way it worked. So what took place was that after his body was recovered, everybody that kind of ended it to a certain extent. I had been in touch with the profilers out of New York. We had discussed this case, and then subsequently I learned that they became involved in the case. Wow. And that's where the docu-series became the Smiley Face Killers. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was through their part of it, they found some ligatures on Dakota's neck. There was some conflict between the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office and Dr. Cyril Weck, who is a well-known medical expert throughout the country, probably throughout the world, who had conflicting issues. I know they tried to get the family and the investigators tried to get the medical examiner to change the ruling because it was accidental drowning. So that's where it is today.
Wow.
It's accidental drowning, and it's difficult at times to get these medical officials to change their findings.
Yeah.
Unless you bring them some significant amount of evidence too.
And they kind of dictate the future of the investigation to an extent. If they say it was accidental and there's not any other probable cause, it seems like the case would just shut down at that point.
It basically does.
Wow.
It basically does. Sometimes medical experts make mistakes like everybody else.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to look at that, and sometimes you have to use outside medical experts and outside investigators sometimes to take a different look.
Yeah.
Not everything all the times may seem as it is.
Yes.
There may be some underlying factor there that sometimes you just don't realize.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when the medical professionals make those type of determinations, law enforcement, kind of sides with that and says, well, they're really the chief law enforcement in that position.
Yeah.
And so unless we can bring some different evidence, because that's what I face now in the case that I'm currently involved with. Mm-hmm. And that's always a very difficult thing to overcome. Yeah. When medical people make those decisions.
Yeah. So crazy. There's a lot more we can talk about. We should have you back on sometime to talk more about this space. It's a truly fascinating space. We're going to wrap up this segment, and when we come back, it's going to be rapid fire questions. Jumblethink is really all about helping you turn those dreams and ideas into reality. And I hope that this show is doing that for you. But we only know if you let us know. What do you love about the show? What do you want to see changed? Who are your favorite guests? What are some guests you'd like to see on the show? What are some topics you'd like covered? Or maybe what are the questions you need answered? Drop us a note and let us know what you would like to see on the Jumblethink podcast and radio show. You can do that by emailing me at hello@jumblethink.com or heading on over to jumblethink.com and dropping us a note through the contact form. And of course, you can always drop us a note through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to make this show better for the things that you would like to see and hear. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions.
Levez seulement le bras pour mettre l'aiguille sur le disque. Mettez le contact, reposez votre bras et attendez.
We are back with Larry Forletta. Before we dive into rapid fire questions, Pittsburgh's a kind of cool little city. It's got a lot of reinvention going on, a lot of tech coming into it because of Carnegie Mellon, let's say that right. I'm sure somebody listening is like, what are you talking about? Anyway, there's a lot going on in healthcare, and it's a really unique community. You've been able to see it over a long time evolve and change, but you like to give back to that community. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you do in that space.
Well, Pittsburgh is a great community.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And you have seen the industry change into the medical field. And with Carnegie Mellon or CMU, they're on the forefront.
Yeah.
One of the things that I try to do in my sphere is try to give back to the community.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we have done and in the past and continue to do, we do what we call risk and threat assessments.
Oh, cool.
On the security related issues.
Yeah.
For example, I've had somebody approach me to do a risk and threat assessment for their church, unfortunately, because of the attacks.
Yeah.
And, we had a synagogue attacked in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
In the Jewish community.
Yes.
So there were other churches that, were really concerned about this. We've also did things for school districts. Mm-hmm. Even way back when Columbine happened, we started meeting with the educators, and going back now to women's shelters, because a lot of these women are abused. Mm-hmm. And we did a risk assessment, because what potentially could happen is those abusers can come back to that facility if they find out where that person is located.
Yeah.
So you have to educate the facility what kind of security steps that they should have in place in order to prevent something unfortunately happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Really cool service. And again, the links to Larry and what he's created are in the episode notes. Go check those out. Check out what he's doing. And, he might not be someone that you specifically need, but I'm sure that there might be an organization, an individual, a company that might need his services that you can recommend to him. Now, do you work solely just in Pittsburgh, or do you do things outside of the Pittsburgh region?
Well, I do. I mean, I have literally traveled all over the country being involved in cases.
Yeah.
So traditionally what we do is we work with other investigators in those particular areas.
Yeah.
So for example, on that one case that I mentioned to you with the Major League Baseball cases, we were working with a group of actually retired DEA agents in Miami.
Yeah.
And so, South Carolina, for example, I worked with another former law enforcement person on a case. So it just depends. But we work with other private investigators. We belong to a couple private investigators associations with a lot of great resources. Mm-hmm. We have an international one that I belong to. And then, of course, of my background, we have resources from within our own former organizations, both domestically and internationally. Yeah. So there's a lot of resources that we developed over the years.
Super cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and dive into our rapid fire questions now. And these are a lot of fun. I'm excited to hear your answers on this. First one being, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A police officer.
Awesome. Yeah. What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Well, that's difficult, but they have to look inside of themselves. See, this is what they really want to do in life. It may take a while, but you'll find it.
Love that advice. What is one change you would like to see in the world?
Boy, there's a lot of them, but I think the one word that comes into my mind is decency.
That's a good word for right now. What do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I don't really know if I look at as things as a legacy. I just want to create something that's positive for people. And I want to make sure that my children have something positive in their life.
Where do you find inspiration?
I find inspiration from my family, from my friends, and my religious beliefs, for sure.
What is one book you think every dreamer should read?
I looked at things of history, and I've had classes in college about Roman history. And when you look at the Roman history, it looks a lot like the United States.
Yeah.
And that, to me, still reminds me of what's going on in our world today.
Yeah.
And what can happen to our own great country.
Yeah.
So I don't know a specific book,
but
I can tell you that that's what I've always been interested in Roman history and in the law.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I think there's a lot we can learn from history that can help us navigate the future.
There's no question about it.
For you, how do you define success?
For me, it's accomplishing a goal, whether it's a positive outcome of a case, and sometimes there's not a positive outcome of the case, but at least you gave 100% effort to try to resolve an issue for a family member, who has been distraught on any type of unfortunate situations that had in their lives. Working with other professionals and coming to a successful conclusion.
What is one trend you're currently excited about?
Well, the one trend that I'm excited about is podcasting.
I'm excited about that one too.
And marketing, because I think it's a great tool to get your message out.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's ever been a better marketing tool from what I've seen.
Yeah. What is one habit that you find helpful in your life?
I go to bed early and I wake up early. I exercise every day because exercise is not only good for your body, but it's good for your mind.
Yes.
Good for your spirit and your soul.
Yes.
And so that's my day starts out very early in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm up and about. And then first thing I do is I work out. That's my first priority, because without your health, you have nothing. And so I'm a strong, firm believer in it. I did that for a living, staying in great physical shape, although I'm nowhere near what I was when I was in my 20s.
None of us are. None of us are.
But and I because I played sports in high school and stuff, there was always that athletic thing behind me, that push, that drive, that desire, and where I learned about a lot of things from my coaches, who actually were mentors in a sense, because they really, a lot of people don't understand, but especially in football, but in a lot of sports, those coaches really help shape your life.
Yes.
And that sport in particular shaped me for my law enforcement career.
Wow.
And I think you look at a lot of athletes who come from that background, decide to, go to the next level. If you don't have the ability to go into the professional level, take a look at it and you will see a lot of former athletes in the law enforcement field.
Yeah. Yeah. What's one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
In life or in business?
Whichever you'd prefer to answer.
In life, I wish I was a lot more educated. I came from a background of a poor working class family. They had 8th grade educations.
Wow.
So me and maybe one or two of my cousins were the first group to go and get a college education. But I can tell you this, I learned a lot from them without getting a formal education about life in general, about family, and about respect. I think that was one of the most important things I learned in life, and I've carried that through my life.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
Probably selling cars or something. I don't know. or trying to do the public speaking circuit, or just going out and do public speaking. I think that I can bring that to the table because of all my experiences and how I can communicate with people. I get along with people easily and very well. When you have that concept, you become successful, no matter what profession you're in. If you know how to work with people and respect them and they respect you, you become successful.
Our final rapid fire question. What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
My one dream is to become a successful entrepreneur. That's my dream.
Love it.
I looked at the gentleman that found Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah.
He started at a relatively old age.
He did.
And I read his book. And that became an inspiration for me, believe it or not.
Wow.
That was one of my books that I just forgot to mention. But I read his book, and because, after you leave a career in my background, it's like starting all over again.
Yeah.
I had one set of tools, but I didn't have the other set of tools. The other set of tools was being a business person. No clue. No clue about marketing, no clue about websites, and everything, just like any other business, is by learning, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes.
Yeah.
For example, I went through 4 websites. I had to find the right combination of marketers, and I didn't always agree with them, or I didn't like the way they did things. So now I think I found the right marketer for me.
Yeah.
And we work well together. There's great communication. And so that's where I'm at in my business. And again, in dealing with, with accountants, CPAs, they have to handle, I have people to do the bookkeeping. This is something that I had no clue on what to do.
Yeah.
I took my taxes and I filed them, and that was it.
Yeah.
So now you learn about, how to do write-offs, how to learn things, talk to other professionals. And I just don't focus on other private investigators, although I have talked to others who have been in the business. I talk to people like you, who have a broad scope and a different perspective of business. I'm always will be a person who is open-minded, open to suggestions, and to educate myself, because you can never stop learning.
Yeah. Larry, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for taking time, joining us at PodMax Global, and sharing your story. It's really, truly fascinating.
Thank you, Mike, and I'm grateful for getting this opportunity.
Once again, we want to thank Larry for taking time out and being on the show with us today. You can find out more about him. The links are in the episode notes at jumblethink.com. We also want to thank our friends over at PodMax for hosting today's conversation. If you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, or just simply want to tell amazing stories and get them shared on leading podcasts, check out podmax.co. And I want to thank you for tuning in to today's show. We do this show for you, and I hope today's conversation has shown you that your dreams never have to stop, that whether you retire or you're looking for a new future, you can create a new path, just like Larry has. So now it's your turn to dream big and change the world around you.
Cherchez la meilleure position. Les bras et les jambes légèrement espacés. Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. côté. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.